And thank you, LSI, for giving me the opportunity to speak about Intuitive's transformative pathway over the last 3 decades. And today I was asked to speak a bit more about the commercial angle of our business. So let's kick it off here. Just a few notes about my person. I'm a medtech engineer, started 30 years ago, and working in the neurosurgical space, in the cardiovascular space. And then in the early 2000s, I joined an organization called Shirley Fiber Optics. And in the first couple of days in this engagement, I was contacted by a small startup called Intuitive Surgical at the time. And they were asking, can you make an endoscope? Can you make us a light cable? And that is when my journey started with this organization. The first 15 years managing a supplier and a partner for Intuitive. And over the last 10 years now, working as a European lead for Intuitive directly. On the upper right side, you see me proudly presenting DV5 at SRS just a couple of weeks ago. So we launched this new product, our 5th generation robotic-assisted surgical system, which of course is defining our future going to the next couple of years. And in the middle here, and that is a picture I've chosen on purpose, field rides for us as an organization are very important. So I'm joined up here with a surgeon from Switzerland, Professor Dietz, who is highly focused on hernia surgery with Da Vinci systems, doing 4 to 6 cases a day. And these are the two dynamics we observe right now in our industry. On the one side, we define where the future is going to in terms of technology. On the other side, transformation is happening, replacing many laparoscopic procedures. So that is what I will speak about. But of course, here we are still at the beginning, and there are many barriers out there. And I just put a few buzzwords here on that slide. If you think about if a patient is having his first symptoms for lung cancer, he has typically a 1-year journey until he gets a solid diagnostic. 1 year, and of course, this has to be changed. Healthcare money is less and less. Waiting lines, specifically here in the UKI, are still increasing. And of course, health workers are getting less and less. We think that with robotic-assisted surgery, we can contribute a bit on optimizing that. The good news is when we influence outcomes, patient outcomes, all these parameters move in the right direction. And so we work on that journey since very long with a strong vision and mission in mind. And this statement has not changed over the last 3 decades. So we envision a future of care which is less invasive and profoundly better, where diseases are identified earlier, treated quickly, so that patient can get back home to what matters most to them. That is in our heart, and we speak about prioritization later on. That is a core statement which has actual impact in our daily organization. We are an organization with a lot of discipline, with strong principles. And one of the principles is that everything we do and everything we perform inside our organization, outside with customers, is aligned to the quintuple aim, namely to drive better outcomes. Here, as an example, to optimize length of stay, to reduce conversions, to reduce complication rates, to impact the patient experience, but also to impact the care team experience. Of course, because those are the ones which apply the technology on the patients, and everything should happen at a lower total cost of care. That was for decades the big discussion. Are our European healthcare systems able to swallow that investments? But they can. And they can very well. So that is the 4th pillar. And the 5th one, and this is where we concentrate today on, is of course giving more access to patients on those technologies. We are on that journey, as I said, over the last 30 years. Many of you know, and there's a lot of competence out here already, that we are now in our 5th product generation of multi-port systems, starting at the late 90s with the Da Vinci standard system, which made its journey here through Europe, first in the cardiovascular space. Then the first prostatectomies have been performed here. And this was the kickoff of our organization and was driving the development over the years. In the meantime, 2 years ago, we received the CE mark approval for the Da Vinci single port system, at the same time for the ion endoluminal catheter-based robotic assisted system. and just a couple of weeks ago, the Da Vinci 5. So this is what happened in terms of product development over the last decades. But of course, a product is a product, and it requires more than just this. And we speak about our ecosystem here. We can go more in depth later on. But if you think of everything which is built around it, this really differentiates us and makes it valuable for our customers. Namely, for example, the technology we provide, the instruments, the vision technologies, the software, the applications, which delivers the data and insights to take the right decisions. Then if you take the stream of professional education, our work with the societies, training each surgeon on the proper use of this technology, and then all these resources which make sure that the investment of the hospitals are being used in a way that these programs are successful. May it be operationally, economically, strategically, there are a lot of support resources ensuring that this will work out. And everything happens with a very strong patient-first mindset. Again, that is one of our additional principles we have. Patient is always in focus, and we know that these products are used to save lives, and that requires a lot of trust into our organization. And we are here to deliver on that promise, and we have. Over the last decades, around 17 million patients have been treated with Da Vinci platforms. Just in the last year, 2.7 million. The Ion system, just as a comparator here, we are in the 200,000 procedure space. And just in the last year, nearly 1,800 Da Vinci systems have been delivered to the market, adding up to nearly 11,000 of those working day to day, between 2 and 3 times in average. So these are numbers. What about evidence? Over years, we have been asked to deliver more evidence clinically at the beginning, then later it was more economically. In the meantime, and Da Vinci is probably one of the most studied medtech product out in our industry, 43,000 peer-reviewed publications has been created on the proper use of that technology because data are important. Just the last year, 4,000 have been added. The question here again you might raise is how solid is this evidence and how high is the level of evidence? And here I just brought with me one of those impactful studies from the last year. Here researchers have looked into those 43,000 peer-reviewed publications, and they just pulled out those with high level of evidence. So I'm speaking about randomized controlled trials, prospective cohort studies, and large database studies. These have been pulled out. These are about 230 of those 43,000. And these researchers looked into the following outcome measures: conversions, blood transfusions, complication rates, length of stay, mortality rates, reoperations, and the operative time on those procedures which are listed up here on that slide. And 3 cohorts have been compared: open, robotics, Da Vinci procedures, and laparoscopy or VATS. And interesting is that here from Europe, a third of the high level of evidence studies were delivered from European researchers, 78. And by looking at the results, many of you might say it is not really surprising that against open surgery, this is why we came on the plate, there are high numbers of improvements. Look at blood transfusion, 75% less likely compared to open surgery. Length of stay, in average 2 days shorter. 30-day mortality rate, 46% less. Readmission rates lower, etc. That is not a surprise, even though the time of the surgery might be a bit longer. But if you look at these numbers compared to laparoscopy or VATS, that is a surprise. Still, conversion rates went down by 56%. 10% less likely of complications. Again, another half day, length of stay shorter, and. And if you add these numbers up and do the calculation, what does that mean for patients? It's interesting when you compare the 2.2 million patients treated robotically in 23. Just take this number and put those evidence factors against it. It means that approximately 133,000 conversions to open surgery could be avoided by performing robotic-assisted surgical procedures. This is translatable in 260,000 days in the hospital saved. And of course, the 15,000 readmissions could have been avoided. And here, by looking at these numbers, we believe that we deliver on the promise. So that's a bit on the facts where we are today in terms of evidence. And of course, when we look at the adoption of these technologies going into the global markets, we see that Da Vinci surgery has grown in the procedures we address. You can see those in the small prints here. We are right now at 44% market adoption, having overtaken open surgery already years ago, and just last year, even laparoscopy. Question might be, what about Europe? We did the same analytics for Europe. You can just zoom us 5 to 7 years earlier in the adoption curve. But interesting wise, we follow exactly the same pattern here. So, which is interesting. First of all, it's in front of us, this transformation. And secondly, it's predictable. So we know what we are doing. And this is probably one of the reasons why so many market entrants are coming to this market right now. So finishing on global data, few information about Europe here. This is our European map. You see here 2 colors. The light blue is where we still are distributing through distributors, so where we are not directly present. And many companies, when they start their early journey into the medtech space, cannot invest in their own commercial organization. So these distributors are with us since many, many years, many decades, and they are highly respected and highly competent. And in the dark blue area is where we are right now, directly acting with our own commercial teams. And just this year, we found an agreement to onboard one of the distributors working in Italy and Spain. So this picture is changing over the time. So that is investment in our markets. Another factor I wanted to call out is investment in infrastructure. You see these pink dots there. This is where we have facility locations, partially commercial centers, partially production sites. So we are producing all the endoscopes, all the vision equipment already here in Europe, in Germany, as well as just recently announced in Bulgaria. And we produce more. And we know that we are living in a global, unpredictable environment. These are investments which help us to protect the fact that we are transforming healthcare, and these procedures go into standard of care. The blue dots here are commercial education center, where we train surgeons in all these countries every day. So there are more than 20 of those right now. So that is a machine which is running every day to bring new surgeons on those systems. Again, also here from a European perspective, some numbers: 2.5 million patients treated, 15,000 surgeons already being trained, 1,800 Da Vinci systems running every day in Europe, in average 2 to 3 cases. And just last year, around 400,000 procedures performed. In those procedures I'm listing here, still you see urology as the dominant procedure here in Europe. But you see that the growth of visceral surgery, so general surgery, is the steepest. Then there is gynae, then there is thoracic and more. If you add those up, they are even bigger than urology. So the picture is changing. Interesting on that picture is in our home market in the United States, these curves have happened sequentially, more or less. Here, it's all happening at the same time. This is this excitement we are currently experiencing here in Europe as the mind has just shifted after the COVID times. Okay, coming to the end of numbers and where we are today. We are, as I said, currently managing through unpredictable global environments. Here in our social influenced healthcare systems, it is partially tougher to market and to sell than, for example, in the United States. Here, clinical economic data are key. We have to prove, we have to work with evidences as they are influencing our reimbursement structures. And of course, the question to have a proper infrastructure to enable the delivery of products every day is another thing we are currently heavily looking into. While we are here, we are working with many organizations together already. We want to reach out to the broader medtech space to continue to cooperate successfully. One of the questions to us is always, how do you decide to bring other companies and other technologies on board? Here are a few principles. They should be aligned to our mission. They should support our quintuple aim, namely mostly to drive patient outcomes, that we are together clearly better and also economically better for all parties. This is just common sense. And over the last 3 years, together with many external players, we have focused on growing in general surgery. We have invested in lung cancer diagnostics with the Ion system. We are growing everything besides urology right now heavily. The introduction of SP was one of those key initiators we have kicked off. Supply chain optimization I've mentioned already. And of course, everything related to big data and AI is currently heavily looked into. How do we approach and how do we cooperate and engage the relations with some of you, these are typically two teams. One is, you can call them business development. These are organizations which have ready-made technologies or products we onboard relatively easy. But on the other side, we have the Intuitive Ventures organization, which is investing in early startups, in early innovations. That is what we do in the business development side over the last couple of years. Many companies, and I've listed here a couple of those, have been onboarded. I was personally one of them. You see this name surely on the upper left side. So we acquired this business back, which is now a key piece of our production here in Europe. You see Kindheart, the organization with which we have received additional know-how, how to create artificial organs and how to use them in our trainings. In Touch Health for our digital space, Orpheus as well, Novadac helping us to optimize the Firefly technologies, and all of these organizations either have handed over a part of their organization to us, or a product or a technology. It differs, but very successful onboardings over the time. When we invest in earlier seed funding into startups, here, the Intuitive Venture organization is very active, and we have one of my colleagues here. I don't know if she's in the room, Muriel Thinard-McLean. She will speak here tomorrow, going deeper into how we are doing this. But in principle, we are focusing on 3 areas. On the left side, improving access to minimally invasive surgery and the integration of those technologies. In the middle one is precision diagnostics and interventions, where we heavily look into it. And then, of course, everything related to big data enablement. And here you can see a few of those startups where we are currently investing around 250 million of assets. And of course, we are not alone in that space. At the lower level here, there are other companies, of course, investing in those organizations. Coming to an end here, I gave you an insight on a little bit on our history, where we are right now in Europe. So our organic growth has been commercially driven strongly, and we have the chance now to speak in a couple of minutes about this commercial journey, but it has to be balanced out with everything we do strategically in terms of business development and venture funding. With this, I'm closing my keynote this morning. Happy to be on a discussion with you, and I'm asking Bryn Davies to come on stage with me here. Thank you. Hey, good morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Dirk, so much, and really insightful presentation and fascinating. And when we decided to do this together, we really spoke about commercialization. And what was I thrilled with Dirk being able to join us was the fact that we were going to talk about not just the great technology and all of the scale and the success that Intuitive have had over this time and the impact on patients, but also really importantly, commercialization. You know, having grown up in the medtech world for, 10 years and then started 10 years, I see a little frustration around going to market quite late with the commercialization plan, or thinking about commercialization quite late. So what we're going to do now for the next 20 minutes or so is talk about the commercialization. What are the practical steps, the know-how that you could take forward as entrepreneurs, as early stage companies, and principles that you can really think about to enable you to be able to scale your products. So with that in mind, it'd be great to look under the hood a little bit more of 10 years of success in that growth. So thinking about it, what are the steps that you take to convince an organization to, spend $2 million on a robot? How do you do that in terms of a sales process and commercial process?
Of course, and maybe it's sometimes surprising to understand that that there's a reason why a 1 or 2 million device is at the end cheaper than a one-time use scalpel. And that is sometimes a shocking discussion, but that is what it's about. We have to prove the value of what we do. We have to prove that the added value is at the end saving the healthcare system a lot of money, and of course is good for the patients. And if you are able to do that, we know we name this process quantify the impact. If you can quantify the impact of your technology well, with the use of evidence, with the use of other means we can speak about, then this discussion is obviously pretty successfully being done. And that is, I would say, one of the key pillars of our commercial success, being under control of our data and being able to speak about it.
And with that in mind, and thinking about some companies who are going to struggle to have that data, they're going to struggle to have that health economic argument when you begin, especially if it's in a new sector. So how would you, or what did you do early on 10 years ago in this complex heterogeneous market of Europe to try and think about that discipline or that sales process, and how early would you go in terms of applying that principle for a device?
Yeah, just speaking about evidence not available, indeed, also 10 years ago, there was not too much going on here in Europe. Specifically, economic evidence was not there, but typically also hospitals, yes, they look at research, they look at clinical and economic studies, but at the end they believe in their own data. And this is where we can kick in commercially. We are training every commercial rep to be able to measure what the surgeon is doing in the OR before integration and after. And that's not that difficult. You have to count, you have to speak with the people, you have to put it into a specific format, and then you compare to what happened afterwards. And very often it's surprising to the surgeons how great they are doing. And by doing this exercise, this quantify the impact exercise, you are enabling them, first of all, to realize and to speak about it. And that is key. And I would urge everybody to look deeply into those processes early on. Yeah, because I agree. The evidence is not needed. Evidence often is very expensive to be acquired. Studies are expensive. But this dialogue with surgeons is not expensive. It's just a healthy way of interacting with them, and they appreciate that very, very much.
Yeah, and I've seen, and I get contacted about, from a clinical entrepreneur and an engineer that says, we've built this, we've invested it, we built it. Can we find an extrovert, chest-beating salesperson just to go sell it, please? And normally that's quite late in the day where you're saying, well, I can't, perform miracles. I can't do that. We need to think about how the product was built. So how do you engage with your R&D teams, or how early do you sort of think about that commercialization standpoint for either a new product launch or a first-to-market product?
I think what I just spoke about was how we speak with customers in a very structured and efficient way, but at the same time, we use similar methods by going deep with our commercial teams. As you said, sometimes salespeople, I consider myself as such as well, even though I'm an engineer, but everybody has to sell their vision and their products in our organizations. But sometimes these functions and roles are considered as artists and as people which know what they're doing, and they have good relations and they have good networks, and this is how they can eloquently convince to sell their systems. But that is probably not enough to place a disruptive innovation where you have to convince. And here, the increase of likelihood of success is a key tool to really make your business case real. And what I'm speaking about is many of the sales steps can be measured. And a sales rep has all kinds of opportunity. He can go to surgeon A, or he can go to surgeon B, the one who is shouting out loudest. He wants to be trained, or the one who is maybe access and has a system in house which is not heavily used, but is not as loud. So where do you go? So, and here, of course, clear guidance, very simple. Dear sales rep, you first go to the surgeon who has access and has probably procedure potential. And then secondly, you go to this other one. And if you do these logic steps in each of your commercial process and put them all together in a good sequence, then you have a solid commercial organization. Sounds simple, but it requires a lot of data collection, a lot of process engagement, and a lot of management to ensure that everybody's working in the same way.
Yeah, I grew up in more in the orthopedic side of the business. It was very entrepreneurial. You know, you'd get your kit, you'd go out to the bag, and you'd spray and pray and hope someone would come through. So it's that discipline of execution, that understanding of who is going to give you the best return. And having then worked on the startup side of things, I started thinking, what's an early stage customer versus an ideal customer? And one of the challenges was the access, and you need to go quickly to get your first customer, even though you know that customer might not be ideal later on. So how have you found that transition from those early customers to ideal, or when you're upgrading from the third version, second version, first version through to Da Vinci 5? How do you manage to work that? Is it a similar process, or?
Yeah, I think it's a similar process. You say the word upselling. Yes, of course, for us, going from one generation to the other, it is a great progress, because these surgeons, of course, they want to enjoy the latest innovation, which gives them additional value. But it typically comes with a price increase or a premium, as we call it. And this premium has to be justified. And if you're not able to do that, it's hard. And of course, for every feature, for every new bit in our offering, we have to show that it makes sense, that I'm coming back to the quintuple aim, that it is driving the better outcomes, that it's driving patient and care team experience. And at the end, it's lowering total cost of care, even though it might be a price premium at the beginning. And if you master that, you can be successful. And the discipline at Intuitive is really something which surprised me when I entered that organization, that there is a strong will and desire to follow those principles.
Yeah, and I think would like to talk a little bit about competition and new entrants in the market, but it's really interesting where people have a perception of a great new product and it'll sell itself, and you go out there, and obviously the discipline that you say. So what happens when competition comes in, and we had Mark Slack from CMI yesterday speak about a 5mm instrument versus a 7 and 8, and how have you found that in more recent times as the growth of that robotic market is? Yeah. As we saw at SRS, it was just incredible, the number of different robots and devices that are out there from all over the world. So how have you found that? How have you seen that?
Yeah, so same impression for me, for those which have been at SRS. Great event, great show. And it was shocking to see all these robotic vendors out there now. Shocking, but positively shocking, because when you are more or less alone on that journey, it's hard to argue. Not that we have not competed at the time as well. Our competition was open surgery, our competition was laparoscopy, and now other robotic players are coming into that space. And we are using the same kind of methods. We have to compare outcomes, we have to compare patients and surgeons' experience, and we have to compare economics. And one factor I have not mentioned is that these investments have to be used every day, and they have to be up and running every day. I don't know if you have heard this number of 99.6% uptime guarantee we are giving with such a system. So what we say with that is, if you invest in such a technology, it has to run every day, seamless. And this is stuff where we can call it the ecosystem. So everything which is around a product. And in my mind, that is where the real challenge is, because commercial competences, logistics, uptime, service organizations, all of the bits and pieces around make really such a program successful. And in my mind, speaking about other players coming on, we appreciate that a lot, because working in public tenders as a one-off is always challenging, since these organizations and some big names are part of that. Everything got more interesting, because there is no more discussion that these technologies make sense for patients and healthcare systems. Now it's about letting customers choose and decide and compare.
It is. It's an interesting one. When you're first to market in a new category, you're trying to convince against apathy or history or a lack of understanding in that. So as there's more competition, then the ecosystem, the ocean rises and everyone can do well. I think there's a case around a vending machine of a Coke can. If there's one, you're deciding if I'm going to buy a drink or not. And if there's a Coke and a Pepsi, I'm going to decide which drink I'm going to have. So everyone benefits in that way. And how do you work? You mentioned some of the partners as well on them working with Ion, maybe with Siemens, if I'm right. So what are the places where you could work with competition or work with those around you? Do you foresee more of that in terms of coming forward?
You mean joining up forces?
Yes.
So when we, for example, speak of the regulatory environment, policymaker engagement here, we have great cooperations with other players in our soft tissue field, but also with robotic players in the orthopedic side or wherever, because at the end it is about enabling our healthcare systems to really bring these opportunities earlier to our healthcare systems, because patients do benefit from them. And here sometimes our healthcare spaces are a bit slow and out of certain reasons, but here we are cooperating a lot.
Yes, indeed. And we'll open it up if people have questions momentarily, please, would love to do so. And but one of the ones thinking about that, the complexity of the European market and the uncertainty in the world, and thinking about that sales or launch, and we've all got choices between UK, go to Europe or different markets. How do you see those different markets in terms of attractiveness to go to for a new technology? Do you see a difference between the sort of accessibility of those markets in terms of where you would go, or a differentiator? You spoke about obviously bringing on board the Italian and Spanish distributor as well. So do you see sort of some growing quicker than others, or a change in sort of attitude that's addressing to innovation?
I mean, when you look at our journey, we kicked our business off around 25 to 30 years in France. Here in Europe, this is where typically US companies are landing, probably because of Paris attractiveness or the nice people there, and of course the size of the market. Second priority was then Germany, then followed by UKI. I think it's all size and healthcare size driven. And then you make your tour from one region to the other, and we are still in that process. And there are still markets out there in the world which are not served. And yes, you can't do everything at once, so you go where the biggest opportunity is first.
Yeah, it's that discipline of focus, and we get the opportunity costs. You're always looking over and thinking, I could go. Yes. Maybe I should go in that. The grass is green. I'll go and try, and then you spread thin.
And all these services I spoke about have to be set up in parallel. So it's not just sending a bunch of commercial people in a country. All the support functions need to be available. Otherwise, it won't make sense.
Yes.
And so these are wise decisions, and it takes time.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. We've got some quick fire questions for the next few minutes, but if there's questions from the audience that you'd like to ask Dirk, we'd happily open it up. If there's any that come to mind, any volunteers to go first? We have two on this side.
Hi, Dirk.
Hey.
My name is Mike White with HSBC Innovation Banking here in London, but I'm from the United States. I'm just curious how your commercial strategy is affected by the changes that are happening in the United States. With hospital systems have been struggling the last few years post-COVID. Hospital systems have been transitioning or fighting the competition of ASCs, these ambulatory service centers. So they're scaling down in these lighter footprints. And, recognizing, healthcare in the US kind of casts a shadow upon Europe and strategies and decisions in Europe. How does that impact the way that, Intuitive has this incredible growth story and you continue to grow and innovate? So I'm just curious how you think about that.
Yeah. Let me try to answer. Yes, so we typically follow, as you have seen in that curve, the path of our US friends. And it's really shocking how equal it is just a couple of years later. You mentioned COVID. clearly after COVID here in Europe, the growth has kicked off heavily because the understanding why it's important to send patient home earlier was clear to everybody. Before that, it has been seen as a nice luxury moment to stay a bit longer in hospital after surgery. But since then, it's clear we have to send them out very fast. This is then overtaking, you mentioned the ACs in the United States. I think here in Europe, same dynamic. Procedures, simple procedures are pushed into ambulatory centers with the goal to save cost again. And so same thing is happening here. My answer to that is we have the biggest growth dynamic in those procedures, even though it's happening here as well. But the understanding is that compared to a average use of a Da Vinci system 10 years ago, which was 2 to 3 a week, today we see 2 to 3 a day. And we have hospitals performing up to 8 cases a day. And if you do the economics, it makes sense even in ambulatory centers. And then there's, of course, a portfolio of products. Probably you don't shoot with a DV5 to a cholecystectomy first, but there are other choices. And this is more an accelerator as a threat right now. Does it make sense? Yeah.
There's a question just next door.
Katrin Siebenberger from Meadows. Dirk, thank you. I was wondering about the AI use cases because Intuitive has been an extremely data forward and extremely big data company since forever. And specifically AI use cases now for you, what are you looking at?
Yeah. Speaking about AI, we can probably speak forever, but we see that this way, that AI first needs a proper baseline on good data. And we have the beauty to collect data since more than 20 years. We sometimes call the Da Vinci's the first Internet of Things, because at the time, the decision to connect all these devices to a central station to collect data with the intention to increase uptime was very wisely chosen, because that enabled us to really measure and to improve the systems over time. Now we have all this data. Clinical information has been added, healthcare information has been added, surgeon information is added. It's a complex environment, so a lot of data. And here, of course, AI can help a lot in prioritizing the advice to surgeons and healthcare systems. I would say that is a big piece of the advice, giving also in managing our commercial teams, because also they have a huge amount of information and it's hard for them to prioritize. So there's a lot going on in that space. But on the other side, of course, and that's probably where you are pointing on, the surgical space will benefit from this information as well. So yes, so both of those are heavily driven right now.
Good. We're coming to the close. We probably have time just maybe for
one more.
Yeah, one more.
Thanks, Nicolas Bowenstein. I lead a preclinical lab in Paris, and we actually got to work with Intuitive in 98, 99, so it really goes way back on animals. My question regards, so I see that the clinical benefit is very obvious, and I see how this definitely helped the progression of your company to where it is today. But I see a lot of other companies working in robotics, and namely in endovascular. And my question is, what is your take? Now, I see that you can have partnerships, but what is your take on endovascular robotics, where the benefit for me is mostly that of the physician, of not being exposed to X-rays? I don't clearly see the benefit for patients. And so surely we can imagine that at one point it will be more precise. It will have, AI-driven catheters, etc. But at present, I don't really see the benefit for patients personally. I'd like to know what you think of that.
Not sure if I'm the right one to answer that, but in the cardiovascular space, not necessarily the endovascular, but cardiovascular space, there is a relaunch of this technology right now. There was a ban There was an uplift of regulatory expectations years ago, which avoided the use of these systems in the cardiovascular space. Now this has been changed. We are going back into that market because we see that there is great value in cardiovascular space. In the endovascular, speaking more about flexible catheters, yes, we have developed the ION system, the ION platform, which is currently used in the lung space to take early on biopsies very efficiently. Eventually, this technology will help going into that space. More I cannot answer right now. Yeah.
Thank you, Dirk. So we're just about to wrap up. But if there's any final, so thank you. If there's any final messages, any one key skill or one thing to entrepreneurs out there that you would urge them to do or think about doing, or any final messages?
Yeah, maybe just quick comment. And this is a discussion I very often have with startups. Me as more a technical thinker from my education, but in the course of my journey in the business, I have always worked in the commercial space. Don't forget the commercial strategies to involve into your business cases early on, because in my mind that is at least as important as the core product itself. If the commercial setup and the strategy is not set up well, these ideas will die.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for all the insights. Really appreciate it. Thank you.